I want to talk about the tradition of Bremerton basketball because it preceded Les. And it is a large part of who we are as a community, and it has a lot of responsibility for the quality of the people we've produced out of this community. As Mark indicated, I grew up on East 28th Street. There are 20 or so of us kids roaming around the neighborhoods. Every mom fed us. Every father shook our head. I was disciplined by more dads in my neighborhood than I can count, probably for being a knucklehead every time I did it. Which is a long way of saying I grew up in Bremerton, a place that fully understood way before the pithy phrase, "it takes a village to raise a kid," who did this for 40, 50 years. They did this when they sent soldiers and sailors off to the Pacific during World War II. This was a place that understood that kids were important and everybody looked out for them, and we were raised that way in the neighborhood that I grew up. This gym and this court attempt to hold the tradition of Bremerton basketball. It's Les Eathorne Gymnasium and it's Ken Wills Court. And you all should give yourselves an applause for that. But what I want to say is it's not possible for this place to hold the tradition. This tradition has left this building. It's traveled all over the country. It's gone to Seattle, it's gone to Tacoma, it's gone to Dubai, believe it or not. I know for a fact that Susan Meyer-Stevens, East High School class of 1960, is using Les's philosophies to coach her girls' tennis team in Beverly Hills High School. Atlanta, Georgia, I hear tell, has a pretty high dose of the stuff in the form of a guy named Marvin Williams, Bremerton High School class of 2004. Our basketball tradition even applies a pretty tight defense in the halls of Congress, thanks to Norm Dix, West High School class of 1959. And while the tradition spread everywhere, today we are at its headwaters. After all, this began about 1935, and today we're closing a final chapter on the contribution that Les Eathorne made to that legacy. But it's impossible to talk about Les Eathorne, East High School basketball, and his coaching accomplishments without understanding the influence and the guidance of Ken Wills and that Bremerton had on Les and so many others. Mark's talked about how much he loved this place. Les played in the golden years of Bremerton basketball. A short list of Bremerton greats would need to include Bill Morris, Frank Wright, Ray Volz, Al Mall, Roger Wiley, Boyd McCaslin, Les Eathorne, Louis Soriano, Darwin Gilchrist, Sid Ryan, Ted Tappy, Don Heinrich, Bill Alexander, Al Murphy, Hal Lee. I know I'm missing some great players, and I apologize for that. But this was the blue and gold blood of Bremerton basketball. Most all of these players went on to play college with great success, and all believe that much of their success was due to the large part to the coaching and mentoring of Ken Wills. Ken started the Open Gym as a place not just to hone basketball skills, but as a safe place for kids who had difficult home situations. Wills looked after any kid who sought him out, basketball player or not. Les was one of those kids. Les's commitment to Wills was total. He described Wills to Kitsap Sun's Terry Mosier this way, and I quote, "He changed your life. First of all, he didn't take anything from anybody. No nonsense. If you wanted to play basketball, you had to follow his rules. If you didn't play the way he wanted you to play, you could play at the YMCA or the City League." Les called that Siberia. "We just knew he was better than we were, so we listened to him." When I read that quote, I thought, geez, does that sound like somebody we know? Les's life was changed by Wills. He found direction and trajectory in his life. It was teaching, it was mentoring, and it was coaching young people. He opened the gyms on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, Sunday afternoons for nearly 30 years. He did it for the same reasons Wills did. To develop basketball talent for sure, but really to provide a safe place in Bremerton for kids to find community, development, friendship, and to seek the guidance and support when life at home was not so great. And I know that's the truth because I played basketball and I went to school with kids who were in that category, and they had a safe place with Les Eathorne at the gym. Les was a father figure to hundreds of kids in Bremerton, many of whom never played basketball for East Bremerton. The Bremerton basketball tradition that began with Ken Wills and was carried by Les Eathorne passed through the likes of Bill Morris, Louis Soriano, Tom Wallenborg, Lyle Bakken, Lyle's here someplace, Alan Martin, most beautiful jump shot I ever saw in East basketball, Steve Boyce, Richard Arena, Rick Walker, Mark Bergsma, and Casey Lindbergh. It's this line that stretches back over 30 years that has now become our responsibility to carry forward. Now, there were a few traditions that were followed in the Eastside basketball program. Some of them became superstitions. Rick talked about the 3:33 on the clock. There was getting off the bus at the bottom of the Silverdale Hill and walking up the hill to Central Kitsap High School, because one year it snowed and the bus couldn't make it up. The players had to get off, walk up the hill, and on that night they routed South Kitsap, or Central Kitsap. From that on, everybody walked up the hill. There was the Wednesday night college games, and how the players picked their teams told Les a heck of a lot about how they felt about each other, and he used that information to coach and build the team. If you played for Les, you ran lines after every practice, forever, it seemed like. But you'd nearly be done, and he would say the same thing, let's run one for Port Angeles. Nobody knew why we ran one for Port Angeles, except one reason. Nobody liked Port Angeles. And then for us, in the 73 team, there was a god-awful smelling Timberline cologne that McKinsey got his hands on. We used it when we played Timberline in January and won. So we hauled it to UPS, and lo and behold, we're playing them in the state championship. We're in the tunnel behind the stands waiting to go out, all lined up, and Cliff goes, I forgot the cologne. And Les turns to McKinsey and says, get the cologne. Off he goes to the locker room. He comes out with this bottle, he rips the lid, and he's just spraying it down the hallway. And there's all these people walking through the hallway, and this stuff's getting all over him. Sort of an environmental wayside under the stands at UPS that night. But there was one tradition, and it happened several times in every game for 30 years. And it happened during timeouts. It didn't matter if Les was drawing up some magic plan on that clipboard or if he was simply reminding his players to play East basketball. Each timeout ended the same way. He would look at each player with that fire that burned in his eyes and that intensity that was his game voice, which is way different than his conversational voice, and he would say to you, you can do this, you can do this. I learned this lesson as a junior. If you don't mind, a quick personal story. I was a mediocre player as a junior. I knew when I was going to get in the game, and it probably was when the score looked something like that. We'd played Juanita in a district tournament game, played lousy, and won by 2 points. We thought they played over their heads, and we played down. As fate would have it in sports, we met Juanita in the semifinals of the state championship. Les took that game approach as if it was going to be another 2-point game. So it was a little surprising to Bryan Garinger and I, a minute into the second quarter in a very tight game, to have Les get up, turn to us and say, Torseth and Garinger, in for Waffle and Arena. We jumped up. We were trained. Off came our coats to the scoring bench. I remember passing Eathorne and Hackett, and they were laughing. I know on a fact that my mom, sitting high up in the UPS stands, turned to my dad and said, what in the hell is Les doing? Doesn't he want to win this game? That was nothing compared to the looks that Waffle and Arena had when we came onto the floor. I know they're thinking, has Les gone crazy? The fact is, he'd gone crazy like a fox. He banked on this game being close. He thought he could use his timeouts judiciously at the end of the second half to produce a run. He needed to talk to Waffle and Arena, and he figured Torseth and Garinger can't screw it up that bad in a minute. Turned out the game was a rout. But the last thing that he said to Bryan and I when we were at the scorer's table was what? You can do this. You can do this. I remember this experience several times a week my entire life, not because I want to relive the glory days. Nobody gives a dang about that. After all, Bryan and I were not Arena and Waffle. We did not turn this game around, but we didn't screw it up either. I remember this lesson because I need to use it constantly in my work and when I was coaching youth basketball, and I actually even remember it once in a while when I'm a husband and a father. Les permanently changed my life in that moment. Mark, you asked me who the teacher was who did that? That was the moment, and that was the man. And he did it as a teacher, not as a coach. And here's the thing that I want to say. Les changed lives because he taught and coached to the potential he saw in you and not the limits you saw in yourself. If you came here today because Les coached you or taught you in a class or taught you to drive, and you're wondering, how do I carry the legacy of Les Eathorne forward? He's given us that direction. Parent, teach, and coach other people to the potentials you see in them and not to their self-perceived limits. And every once in a while you might remind them, you can do this. Thank you, Coach. Night Pride.